We Americans are always at our best when we hear and heed the cries of others.
When confronted with massive human suffering, Americans have always stepped up and answered the call to help.
But there's never been anything on a scale of human tragedy in our own hemisphere, like what we're now witnessing in Haiti.
Today, President Clinton and I are joining together to appeal to you with real urgency.
Give now, and lives will be saved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, we're very angry today. I think they caught the U.S. Marines and the Rangers off guard today.
This is a clear case and a shameful case where Canada, the United States, and France joined together instead of furthering democracy, ended democracy.
Haiti, we must kill the bandits, documents the horror of a Canada, U.S., and France-led coup d'etat and military occupation by United Nations forces.
Hold on for a second, please. President Aristide resigned. He has left his country.
Bill Clinton, named by the United Nations as U.S. envoy to stabilize Haiti. This is like putting Catholic priests in charge of the Child Protection Agency.
This would be humorous for its irony if it wasn't so deadly serious. Bill Clinton, as President of the United States, was someone who participated in the systematic destabilization of Haiti. In a nutshell, what happened was that Aristide was overthrown in a violent U.S.-backed coup. You covered it under the George H.W. Bush administration. Clinton campaigned on a pledge to stop the cruel treatment of Haitian detainees being held at Guantanamo, and also to reverse the Bush administration's cruel policy in general toward Haiti. Instead, what Clinton did is he kept Aristide in exile for years until they could squeeze out of Aristide a commitment to uphold U.S. neoliberal economic programs in Haiti, and that Aristide would agree not to lay claim to the years he spent in exile as part of his presidency. He was a democratically elected president. He fair and square beat a U.S. candidate. The U.S. violently overthrew him. They butchered Haiti. And then Clinton refused to put Aristide back in power, even though he could have done it with one phone call. And instead what he did is he implemented a vicious regime of economic neoliberalism inside of Haiti. The Haitian people now are suffering under that neoliberal economic model and the aftermath of this repression force that just terrorized the people of Haiti. To have Bill Clinton now be sent in explicitly to be the person who's going to, quote unquote, stabilize Haiti and dabble in the economics of this incredibly poor, suffering nation, to me is just a grotesque act on the part of the United Nations. And I think that anyone who's about justice for Haiti should rise up and say that Bill Clinton has no business stepping foot in Haiti in any official capacity with the United Nations at all.
Jeremy Scahill, I want to thank you for being with us. Jeremy's reports can be found at rebelreports.com.
Like making Michael Jackson executive director of Boys Town. You're kidding me, right?
Randall Robinson, author of An Unbroken Agony, Haiti from Revolution to the Kidnapping of a President. He's referring to the ousted president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide. President Obama has tapped President Clinton and former President George W. Bush to coordinate the aid relief to Haiti. I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, Amy, I'm of course troubled by that. I don't think this is the time, neither the time nor the place to discuss those things that have troubled me for a long time in the history of American policy towards Haiti. President Bush was responsible for destroying Haitian democracy in 2004 when he and American forces abducted President Aristide and his wife, taking them off to Africa, and they are now in South Africa. President Clinton has largely sponsored a program of economic development that supports the idea of sweatshops. Haitians in Haiti today make 38 cents an hour. They don't make a high enough wage to pay for their lunch and transportation to and from work. But this is the kind of economic program that President Clinton has supported. I think that is sad that these two should be joined in this kind of effort. Sends, I think, the wrong kind of signal.
It has to be said, certainly both former presidents have a great deal of history with Haiti, don't they?
Yes, and it's not a very pleasant history. The choice of them to oversee this aid program is rather odd. Bush was responsible for overthrowing Aristide, President Aristide, in 2004. Before that, in 1990...
The democratically elected president.
Right. And before that, in the early 90s, Aristide had been overthrown by a military coup, and he was in exile in the U.S., and he was kept in the U.S. for a few years without being allowed to go back to Haiti. When he finally went back to Haiti, he went back with only with certain warnings that he should not play around with his socialist beliefs. You know, forget about that, and stop evoking class conflict and all that. He was told he must follow a free market program, and under those terms he was put back in power. And he was first, they almost wanted to make him form a coalition government with the military, the same military which had overthrown him. This is under Clinton. So that's outrageous that he should be appointed to such a position. And Bush overthrew him completely in 2004. So it's a very odd choice for this program.
It's interesting because we've had many guests come on and say one of the reasons why Haiti is suffering so desperately after this earthquake is because it wasn't allowed the sort of development and equitable reform and so forth that perhaps Aristide was actually espousing. I mean, do you agree with that? Do you think it's... I mean, what does it say then about the U.S.'s plans for the future redevelopment of Haiti, perhaps?
Haiti, for decades and decades, has been the assembly plant of the Western Hemisphere. It is the place where people are paid starvation wages to assemble thousands of products being sold by the multinationals. That's their function in the economy of the Western Hemisphere. And Aristide was amongst their leaders, the one who most objected to this role being assigned to Haiti, and he was the most likely to make changes to that. But for that reason, he was unwelcome in Washington, and that was carried out by Bush and Clinton, this very unwelcome attitude towards him.
Haiti has been under a series of serial dictatorship. Who armed the dictators? There are other hands in Haiti's problem.
In talking about President Bush, while most people may not know the role the U.S. played in the ouster of President Aristide, February 29, 2004, probably what would come to mind when there's any discussion of relief efforts is Katrina.
The problem of what happened in February 2004 continues. We had democracy in Haiti, and that democracy was blighted by the Bush administration. And now President Aristide's party is prohibited from participating in the electoral process. His party is the largest party in Haiti. And why should we be so afraid to let his party participate? If the Haitian people don't want them, they won't vote for them. That is the very essence of democracy, that people get a chance to stand for election and the electorate gets a chance to make a decision. But we have obstructed that process in Haiti. We have done that under the Clinton administration, under the Bush administration, and that continues under the Obama administration. And that is indeed unfortunate.
This investment will grow over the years, we help our neighbors embark on what is going to be a long-term recovery.
Obama, meanwhile, also announced he's asked former President George W. Bush and former President Bill Clinton to co-chair the U.S. relief effort in Haiti. During his first term, Bush cut off desperately needed aid to Haiti in support of the overthrow of President Jean-Bertrand Aristide. Bush's father, former President George H.W. Bush, supported the first coup against President Aristide in 1991. Clinton, meanwhile, helped restore Aristide, but only on condition that he accept harsh neoliberal policies that he'd campaigned against during his election to office.
Everyone has drunk so much Kool-Aid, they can't remember anything about the Clinton years other than I did not have sexual
relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
Justice, it's not about agenda, it's not about mobilizing people, it's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.